Welcome to Read Your Comics. Today I'm looking at 2 issues of The Incredible Hulk with a very special guest. I'm back again with a couple issues of Peter David's Incredible Hulk run, and this is still in the meat of the McFarlane era. So, who better to have join me than the one and only Todd McFarlane, expert on YouTube? You know him as the hobby hero of 2024, West Coast Avengers. How
Hey,
you doing, Dave?
Daryl. Oh, I'm doing great. What a beautiful introduction. I feel like I'll never get that again. But I appreciate you asking me to come on and talk about some of these issues with you because it's Todd and I love Todd.
Yeah, I mean, it would be a missed opportunity to not have you on for some of these books. So when I started this series, I knew I was going to do these McFarlane issues. I was like, I got to have Dave on. It would just be dumb not to bring you on and discuss it some. Before we jump in, I want to ask, like, other than just the Todd connection to this, what is your connection to this era of the Hulk? Do you have?
It is 340 is the gateway drug for me. But I didn't buy all the issues until later on. I was getting into the Dale Keown Hulk run on a weekly basis. I grew up reading and getting into comics because of McFarlane Spider-Man, but as a Wolverine fan, I didn't have the connection there. And then boom, 340 is that connection between Todd, Wolverine, Peter David, all of it.
Well, for me, this was the run that got me into comics as a real month to month collector. I'd dabbled in some stuff as a kid with like Transformers, G.I. Joe, the occasional superhero book, but it was a convenience store near my house growing up. They had some issues of the Gray Hulk. It blew my mind that he was gray. It was the McFarlane era, and it was after 340, so it was like the full on McFarlane with the like heavy brow and all the little
Mhm.
noodly lines and stuff. Just looked wild, and I had to know why he was gray, and I had to know every month. So I credit this run as the run that made me a comic book collector in general.
Yeah, it's a huge deal because, I may not have had a Hulk connection. I always liked him as a kid because we got the Hulk show. We got who doesn't want to be the
Mhm.
big brute? But yeah, I wasn't reading it until later on. Yeah, it's interesting how our age group was sucked in by McFarlane on all different levels. It wasn't
Mhm.
just Spider-Man, it wasn't just Hulk. Some people probably read Infinity Inc. and got into it.
Which I didn't know anything about his DC work until much later.
Mhm.
In fact, it was hard for me to even like. I was more concerned with the character, although McFarlane is like, for me, the first creator that I became like aware of who he was and what books he was working on. Because I, shortly after getting into the Hulk at the convenience store, I found a comic shop and he was already starting his Amazing Spider-Man run, and I was on board with that right away.
Mhm.
So yeah, the McFarlane connection definitely is something that just sucks you into this line. But I stayed with the Hulk all the way through Peter David's run, which is
Yeah.
kind of why I'm doing a series of videos, because it means that much to me as a collector.
And that's great. I mean, a great writer can suck you in, even into a terrible book. And I'm not saying this is a terrible book. I'm just saying great writers can do that.
Don't give away the ghost early here. Uh, um, all right, so we're going to look at 336 and 337. It's an X Factor tie-in. McFarlane's still not doing the covers on these particular issues.
Right, right. And that might be attributed to his doing double duty and deadlines being what they were. I mean, I know as you get into the Amazing Spider-Man run, it was bi-weekly. So,
Yeah.
his
Mhm.
his workload just kept ramping up. So maybe that's the reason. But maybe next time I talk to him, I can ask him.
Yeah, that's a good idea. If you haven't seen, Dave has an interview with Todd McFarlane from just a few weeks ago, from before we, at least from when we recorded this. So if you haven't seen that, definitely go to Dave's channel. All of his information will be in the description. Go check that out after you're done with this video.
Yes.
All right, let's
Uh,
dive into 336 here. Or did you have
okay.
something?
No, no, no.
All right. Like we said, McFarlane didn't do the cover. Let's just jump into the first page here. We get some mysterious shield. What do they call that? The Shield Council in
Yeah.
shadow that Clay Quartermain's talking to there. For me as a young reader, I this was like my introduction to Shield as well. I had
Mhm.
no clue who they were. Now I look back at this, and this shadowy council doesn't make a whole lot of sense to
No.
me.
It's kind of goofy from where our knowledge of Shield is these days. You're totally
Right.
I had that same thought when I read
So I
this
don't
first
know.
page.
Yeah, so I don't know what was going on with Shield in this particular time period. Clay Quartermain had been around for a little while, I guess, and he'd been in the Hulk and maybe some Nick Fury books too. But they're setting it up to where they're saying Bruce Banner's now become expendable for some reason.
Yeah.
And I don't know if you've read the issues leading up to this, but just before this, the Hulk encountered a character named Half Life who was a gamma irradiated character that said he had just been caught in a gamma blast, much like the Hulk, and it was just a year prior, which shocked the Hulk and be like, "What do you mean a year prior? There are no more gamma bombs." And it's like, yeah, there are. So that's kind of what's leading into some of what we're going to see going on in this storyline.
Yeah. Yeah. And I on this first page, I just kind of want to point out from my limited knowledge of comic book making, there's a decent amount of zipatone on this page, and you got one of the classic McFarlane profiles of Quartermain, the
Hmm.
side profile.
Yep.
So
Yep.
even though, and we're going to get to it on the next page, but even though he's not inking himself on this page, I think he might have. This page feels a very McFarlane page. It doesn't feel like it's lost anything, as opposed to some of the other pages in this book where you can clearly tell this Jim Sanders guy is not properly inking McFarlane.
Yeah, now that you're mentioning it, there is a thinner ink line on this particular page than what we see in a lot of the rest of the book. And that's
Mhm,
something I pointed out in a previous issue that
mhm.
the inkers on McFarlane in this run so far have had a very heavy hand on his work that you don't really associate with McFarlane.
Correct, yeah, yeah, and I've been enjoying you pointing that out.
And we see it on the next page, which is a pretty nice splash page of the Hulk knocking down a building, and we have Jim Saunders the third as the inker.
Mhm. Yeah, I don't know much about him, I don't recognize his name, but, there's some things he gets completely wrong, and there's some things that he gets completely right on these pages,
It's just
and,
that heavy line that I see on it, but even this is a little thinner. Maybe by this issue, he was kind of starting to tame it down. Who knows? Maybe Todd had told him like, "Hey, you're going a little heavy on there or something." Because Saunders does do a few issues in this run.
yeah, and the next page, the opposite page, the debris and the cracking and the destruction that Hulk's causing looks a little bit more McFarlane-ish on that page.
Right.
But
Definitely
it's
more
interesting.
line work happening there.
Yeah, and the Hulk's freaking out. He's really upset. He's throwing a temper tantrum, technically.
Because it's almost daytime and he's about to turn into Banner because he turns into
Mhm,
Banner. He turns into the Hulk at night and Banner in the day. It's not
mhm.
just blood pressure triggered at this point.
Which is a Peter Davidism, right? Like, David's the one who put that into lore?
Sort of. In the very first Hulk issue, it was a day and night thing. But then by the second issue, Banner was using like a little condensed gamma ray to purposely change himself back and forth.
Right.
And those first 6 issues of Hulk, I don't think they really knew how they wanted to do it because it's very inconsistent. And it's not until Tales to Astonish when Ditko actually comes on and he introduces the emotional triggers
Mhm.
on the Hulk. And then it just kind of sticks. And that's pretty much what we got up until this point. And I guess, Peter David wasn't on when they turned the Hulk back to gray. It was actually Al
Mhm.
Milgrom.
Okay.
And there was about 6 issues there. Peter David did do a fill-in issue, but there was about 6 issues where Milgrom was almost picking up the pieces of John Byrne, who had unexpectedly bolted to DC, I believe, at that time. So it was very much in flux. And
Mm.
they didn't know what they were doing with the Gray Hulk. That's why they had a Rick Jones Hulk. But Peter David came on, quickly got rid of that Rick Jones Hulk, and started adding the nuance to the Gray Hulk, I would say.
Right.
So yeah, he's mad that he's turning back into Banner. He's in this alleyway, and this dude in a neighboring apartment sees him out there. And the world doesn't really know that the Hulk is gray at this point. So he doesn't recognize him as the Hulk. He
Mhm.
just sees this big gray monster revert back into this guy. And he drags him in to his apartment before the neighboring building collapses. And he's just like, I guess my building's okay. It's safe, even though the neighboring building just collapsed.
And somehow Banner survives getting a piece of debris to the head.
Yeah, we're gonna pretend that maybe he hadn't completely changed back into the Hulk yet there, and there was some Hulk, there was still a little bit of Hulk, resilience in there that
Yeah.
saved him from that. That's my no prize I'm aiming for.
I mean, look, we gotta have a little suspension of disbelief when we're reading a comic book.
Yeah. So, then we get, like, a lot of thought balloons in this stuff.
Oh, yeah.
It's pretty heavy on, like, it's exposition, but it's all, like, thought balloon expositions, and I do like thought balloons. I don't like that they've just completely gone away in comics. They're
It's a bummer.
a it's a little heavily used in this issue, though, I will say.
Yeah.
But he thinks that he's a mutant, and he's heard of X Factor, and, he thinks he'll get, like, a monetary reward if he turns him into X Factor. So, what do you know about X Factor at this stage of comic lore?
Not m I mean, I knew who the team comprised of, but
Mhm.
not much. I was not into X Factor as a kid. I feel like it was one of those things that was more for the 20 somethings and 30 somethings when I was 10.
Yeah, I didn't know a ton about them either. They do a pretty good job of kinda getting you up to speed, that they're
Yeah.
like it's the original X-Men team, but they're pretending to be mutant hunters in a way just so they can, like, have some, like, I guess, government funding or something
Yeah.
and be able to go find mutants in trouble and help them. But they're doing it under the guise of they're coming to exterminate them.
It might be the best plot point of the entire story, these 2 issues, is that they're operating under the fact that they are mutant hunters because it felt more realistic. Um,
Mhm,
but I gotta say, and I'll just say this off the bat, I Copper Age writing for me does not do it. For the most part, it feels very hokey altogether. Um, so I have my issues with these issues, but I think that's the best plot point of them is that, oh, we're mutant hunters because, like you said, they're getting government funding, they can operate in the public, they don't have to
mhm.
worry that they're going to be hunted as mutants because we're still in the part of the Marvel universe where mutants aren't kindly looked upon.
So now we're gonna meet X Factor. We're gonna see they're gonna kinda catch us up on what's going on with this team. We don't see Beast here, right? Yeah, no
Yeah,
Beast.
no,
We're
no
only getting
beast.
part of the team. So we're only getting Iceman Angel either. We're only getting Iceman, Cyclops, and Marvel Girl. They're calling her
Yeah.
Marvel Girl again. And Iceman's powers are kind of out of whack. Apparently, he's having a little trouble controlling them. What do you think about Todd's layout on this page with the particularly the lower two thirds of like Iceman jeans and Cyclops's heads matching with the panels of Iceman's powers kind of going off?
You have to know how to read it for it to make sense,
Yeah,
because if you try and read left side first and then right side, it makes no you have to go left, right, left, right, left, right, left, right.
but
So
I like his headshots though. I do like those,
sure. Yeah, I
particularly the
do.
Cyclops at the bottom.
Mhm. Yeah, it's a valiant effort, but I think it was executed just a little bit off. That
Yeah,
being said, I do enjoy seeing his ice balls.
yeah, his ice ball, the one on the top panel is pretty awesome.
Yeah, yeah, and,
And
he's
this
having
is gonna go ahead.
oh, Iceman's having performance issues. That's.
Definitely. um, and this is going to play a big part as we see coming up. So this is a little bit of foreshadowing.
Mhm.
It's letting us know something that's going on, but also foreshadowing something that's going to happen. And then the next page of the stuff with skids, I guess they're just like tipping them off. Hey, we got a call. You need to go check it out.
Yeah, yeah, it's interesting because, you said about the thought bubbles don't get used anymore. I miss them. I agree with you. I grew up with them, so,
Hmm.
when they're not overused, they're great.
Right. Exactly. And that's how I really view thought bubbles in general. It's yes, they can be overused, and to some degree they are in this, but I think the overcorrection of totally eliminating them these days is a mistake
Yes.
overall in more modern stuff. My personal opinion. It works in a book like Watchmen. It's a big point that there's no thought bubbles, and that it works in that story. But what works in Watchmen doesn't work for everything.
No, no, and then, what's not in thought bubbles is in narration anyway.
All right, so then we see Bruce waking up from his not having the head trauma that he should have, and this guy wearing a pretty awesome checkerboard sweater here. And they're getting to know each other, and the guy's feeling like an ass for calling X Factor at this point.
Well, yeah, it's like, he's selling them out, he doesn't know what X Factor's gonna do. If he thinks
Hmm.
they're hunters, then he kinda has the idea that they're going to hunt Bruce Banner. But yeah, he's feeling a little remorseful, and I also gotta point out, you get a little bit of that Todd smoke coming off those, coffees or teas or whatever he made.
And I just noticed this time when he gets up to answer the door, he like throws the coffee down and it's like spilling. I didn't notice
Yeah.
that the first day, but now I'm seeing it. So he gets a
Yeah.
knock on the door. He thinks it's X Factor, and he's feeling bad at this point because I think Bruce had mentioned he has a wife, and he has a wife anyway.
Mhm.
And he's like, "Man, this guy's just a normal guy. I shouldn't be doing this." Then he gets a knock, and it's his girlfriend. They go for a walk, and she tells him that she's pregnant. And I did find this kind of interesting for this. What is this? 1987.
87, yeah.
1987 in a comic that's basically written for like 13-year-olds. They're hinting heavily towards a very controversial issue, don't you think?
Yes, they definitely are. I mean, I guess you gotta give Peter David props for not, just making it a silly, little plot point. It's actually a mature, very mature plot point,
Mhm.
and, I'm into it.
The guy, which I've forgotten his name,
It's
is
it's
immediately like,
it's
"Huh?"
Dick. It's Dick.
Yeah, yeah, it is. We're gonna call him Dick. Anyway, then he switches back again. He's like, "Okay, we need to get married," and then he's thinking about turning Bruce in again, thinking he's getting a cash reward. He's like,
Yeah.
"Well, I hate to do this, Bruce, but now I have a future family on the way that I have to look after." So, some human turmoil there of guilt and then doing what you have to do for your own personal life, you know?
Yeah, and he also just says, "But I feel like a grade A creep. I'm turning in
Yep.
somebody for the money." I mean, yeah, you're selling him out, and for all you know, they're gonna murder this guy.
Yeah. He has no clue. That
Yeah.
last panel on the page where he's hugging his girlfriend, those are some classic McFarlane bushy eyebrows too.
Oh, yeah, yeah, they really are. These things are gigantic.
Bruce calls Gamma Base. He talks to Quartermain and he talks to Rick, and Rick kind of
Mhm.
tips him off by calling him Bob. And he's like, Rick never calls me Bob. He's trying to warn me about something.
Yeah, yeah, and I do love that panel of all these angry, SHIELD agents sitting around while, uh, Rick Jones is just on the phone. You know what it reminds me of? And I would almost bet maybe it was inspired by the scene in Die Hard where what's his name sells out McClane and he's sitting
Oh
there with
yeah.
Hans Gruber on the phone. Hans, Booby, that's exactly the pose he was in that scene.
I wonder what the time period. That movie came out 87-ish, didn't it?
It did. Yeah, it came out in
Yeah.
'87.
I bet that I you may be right. It may have been something that Peter David
That's
and McFarlane kind of.
Oh yeah, yeah. I just realized that it's Todd. Another question to ask Todd.
So Banner lies. I think they said he was like in Illinois, but he says he's in Seattle.
Yeah, yeah.
um,
Sending Shield to the Northwest.
we're getting on the X Factor plane. They're heading towards Sparta, or no, it's Indiana, I
Hmm.
guess. Um, Dude comes home with a bunch of groceries. Bruce has gone out for a walk. He's just like, "Oh, I'm going to go out for a walk," and really all that's a lot of recap of what's happened in the last few issues. You do
Yeah,
get a
and
nice side profile McFarlane thingy there at the bottom.
you do, and you get him talking about Betty, and we find out where Betty is, in this issue, I believe.
Yeah,
And
at this point, Betty had run off with a guy. I think his name's Ramon. Maybe
something
she had
like
let.
that.
Okay, no. What happened was she had run off with that guy. Maybe it's even in here too. But she had run off with the guy. He had shown up to Gamma Base claiming to be her estranged husband. And of course, she's married to Bruce now. Bruce has like, some issues with the Hulk, and he comes back and he goes to like confront her with this guy, and she goes back to Bruce, and they're in a hotel room together, and the time had changed, like the daylight savings time had changed, and Bruce was trying to time out the time of day, and he was like cuddling with Betty when he turned into the Hulk, and it like injured her real bad.
Sure.
And of course, the Hulk like jumps away, and he's like cursing Banner. He's like, "You could have killed her, Banner." And then when Bruce turns back into to Bruce, his like memory of that happening is very hazy. So it's like the Hulk is trying to hide the fact that he hurt
Hurt
Betty in that
Betty. Yeah.
process. Which is another interesting thing that I think Peter David brought to this era of the Hulk is the Hulk and Bruce exert some influence on each other. Small, but it's there, and
Mm.
they make note of it when they're doing it.
Well, and I mean, Gray Hulk is definitely a nice change also in just the way that he's smart. So
Yeah,
you don't have to dumb down the character all the time.
I've read quotes from Peter David saying he never wanted to write just the Savage Hulk for any extended period of time. That he didn't find that it carried the book as well as having some like craftiness to the character.
Mhm.
And that makes sense to me. I love a good Savage Hulk story, but and as much as I love that Herb Trimpe era of Hulk, it's very repetitive, very formulaic, issue after
Yes,
issue.
very.
Yeah, we're on the next page with X Factor finally shows up at the door of Dick's apartment.
I just wanna point out the hair. Look at all the McFarlane hairstyles, and,
I was I was hoping you would point that out.
and that becomes, more apparent on his Spider-Man run while he's, when he's inking himself, but, yeah, you got Cyclops with a little poof, and you got Jean Grey's hair all over the place. I mean, it
Hmm.
these 2 pages seem to be some of the most McFarlane, but it's still, what Sanders was doing, he wasn't he's not Todd, and Todd's ink line is so, distinctive,
Hmm.
but
Yeah, he takes a lot of the finer details of what Todd does, and I guess Sanders may have been trying to streamline it like he was Terry Austin or something, and
mhm,
that doesn't work, I think, for Todd's style. Todd's
yeah.
style is supposed to be kind of like, I don't want to say like clustered, but uh what's a good word I'm looking for? Full,
I think
full. It's
full,
very
there you go.
full. Yeah.
Yes. Yeah, there's very sparse backgrounds here, and it's interesting, but yeah, it's not its McFarlaneist. And I will
No.
point out we are 12 pages into this book, and we've only gotten one panel, one page with the Hulk.
Yeah. I thought about that when I was rereading this too, that this is a very Hulk light issue.
Mhm.
Um,
Yeah,
well, we gotta go through a whole daytime though, right?
it's true.
So X Factor shows up, Jean with her big flowy hair. That's definitely setting up like how he's gonna draw MJ in the future, you think? Even
Mhm.
Bruce on the next page over has some very McFarlane-y quaff going on.
Yeah, it does. Now, I gotta point out why I don't like these 2 pages for the most part plot-wise.
Okay.
He opens the door and then closes the door, and they're outside, I think, or he comes outside, this guy Dick, and then X Factor comes into his apartment, and then Bobby walks out, and it's just very confusing. It just feels like they're missing a bunch of steps here. Like, everybody's in, then Bobby's out, and Bobby's walking down the street, and he sees Bruce, and Bruce starts running, and then all of a sudden, they're all outside. I feel like there's a teleportation device that they were using that we don't know about.
Yeah. Yeah, I see that now. I guess I didn't notice it on my initial read, but now that you pointed out, yeah, he opens the door, he steps outside, he asks about price, and Gene kind of dresses him down about that.
Mhm.
And then they go in, and then I guess the next panel with Bobby coming back out, it is hard to tell that he's like walking back out.
Yeah, he's walking back out. He walks around the corner or down the
Yeah,
block, and then Bruce starts running, and then the next panel, they're all
all
outside.
outside. Yeah, with their van. Is that their van
Yeah,
next to him? I think
that's their van.
yeah, because they hop in the van. So
And yeah,
apparently Bruce has lost track of time again here too, because our lack of
mhm,
Hulk happens really quick, and it has to be nighttime for that to happen.
yeah,
So Bruce does like Clark Kent jumping in front of the train in the original Superman movie. He
mhm.
crosses over it there. And yeah, their little van gets stuck. And then
They're
all of a
big.
sudden there's the Hulk. Go ahead.
Yeah. Oh, and also, this must be a Hollywood set because he runs 1 block and all of a sudden he's in rural whereverness. Literally, the city's not there anymore.
Yeah, it was a pretty dense little urban area when he was taking his walk and talking to the kids and stuff. And now he's like hit Central Park or something.
Yeah, I
Um,
mean, I look at sometimes I look at comics in the way that I view movies. There has to be some continuity, and it feels like the scene was just condensed into 1 page, obviously because they only have X amount of pages, but yeah, we get the Hulk real quick, real
yeah,
quick.
yep. Yeah, Bruce jumps across the track and then the sun must have gone down instantly. Because he turns into the Hulk. Nice vertical panel by McFarlane, or vertical layout there. It's like
Yes,
separated the way that those panels are separated. It's 3 panels, but that vertical strip.
and
And I like how
that's
it gets closer too. If you'll notice, like it starts with Bobby, a little closer to Jean, and like fully up on Cyclops's eye.
it's very cinematic. Like,
Yeah.
this makes sense to me. This panel layout's like, "Oh my gosh, Scott the train, something just pulled it off its tracks, and, we're going close up. Gene, no, it can't be it." And then Cyclops thinks trouble, but he doesn't vocalize it because there's a Hulk in front of him.
Yep. And we finally get our some more pages of the Hulk, and this is where you get a lot of the like snarkiness of the Gray Hulk and stuff. That I guess this is I love this stuff, but a lot of people criticize Peter David's like sense of humor and
Mhm.
the way that he's like, I don't know, he's not goofy, but he definitely has
No,
some one-liners.
he's snarky, like you said. It
Yeah,
it 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 makes for a good reading experience when you have literally this comic book has been devoid of any humor up until now, and
yeah,
it is a comic book.
yep. So they
Uh,
get and land in a printing press. They make sure you see that in the
yeah.
spartanprinting.com dot com. It probably says company, but like it just cuts off at com, and my internet brain says dot com.
So
That wasn't around in
any
'87.
I don't know if Sparta is a real town, but the one thing I will say that kinda builds upon that is when they drive into the town, it says, "Welcome to Sparta, Magazine Land, USA." So there's a printing
Huh.
press in there, and,
Ah, there you
so
good catch. Good catch on that detail.
and I'd also like to point out, look at that McFarlane moon. It's not as good as all the other McFarlane moons, but right above the printing press, you've got full moon,
Well,
or almost full moon.
it's not completely full, and that plays a part in the Hulk at this
Yeah.
point. When the moon is full, he's more docile or
Oh, that's
a little
right.
calmer because it's the sunlight, and since the moon is reflected sunlight, unlike like a werewolf, when the moon is full, the Hulk is at his like calmest. So the new
Okay.
moon is when he's at his like crankiest. So
Mhm.
we're getting what, like about a 3/4 moon here.
There we go. Three-quarter moon. Plus, I'd also just like to point out another use of the zipatone or some type of duotone,
Oh
something
yeah,
on that
on that
that
first
first panel.
panel. Yeah.
Yeah. Cyclops says, "We're not the X-Men anymore. We're the Exterminators. We all change, don't we, Hulk?" I like that.
Yeah.
And it's funny because I do remember the use of that team name, even though the book was always called X Factor.
X Factor. Yep, I do too. And he's like, "Yeah, we change, and then you're gonna be extinct."
There is a piece of the plot here that was my least favorite portion, but we'll get to it on the next page after this one. But on this following page, lots of machinery. You get the kind of silhouette, almost the shadowed Hulk. A
Mm-hmm.
lot of McFarlaneisms in this next
Yep.
page.
Yep. But again, you can see where that inking is removing some of the
Mhm.
key elements of McFarlane out of this. But yeah, definitely that one third panel, I guess, from the top.
Yeah, yeah, it's a great panel though.
So he's throwing like the rollers, like the big printer rollers and stuff at him.
Yeah, which probably weigh about 100 tons. Now,
Yeah.
um, I would like to point out we all know that it's nighttime, right? So
Hmm.
that's going to play into something that I'm going to say in this next 2 pages.
Okay. And then he starts bringing down the rollers on him. Oh, what about this part with Cyclops shooting around Jean using like reflective surfaces
Yeah,
and that little
it was pretty interesting. I like that.
yeah, little four vertical panels at the bottom. I thought it was neat the way it was laid out because you do follow the optic blast around them.
Yes, yes, I did enjoy that. Now let me just bring something to light here on this next page. It's nighttime. It's a printing press. First 3 pages of this fight, it's just
No
X
one's around.
Factor. It's X Factor versus Hulk. Now all of a
Yep.
sudden, there's 50 people around.
I- yeah, I
I
noticed
mean,
that too.
look, if this was a movie, let's just say it was a Hoth on Empire Strikes Back,
Mhm.
and Luke is hanging upside down in the Hoth, the Wampa, the Hoth monsters coming at. Then the next, shot was 4 people just standing around, going like, "Oh my god, what? Why? Where are these people coming from? Why are they at work? And why weren't they there the first 3 panels?" It just it it's a plot like we've got Cyclops saying the Hulk run. They literally just put people in this so that could happen. It doesn't
Yeah,
make sense to me. It took me right out of the comic. I'm like, where do these people come from?
I did notice that when I was reading it too. That like, oh, these people just suddenly showed up. I mean, you can because it did just turn nighttime. You can assume they're like at the end of their shift or something. But because they
Sure.
didn't establish them when they first broke into the plant, like when the Hulk first crashed in, you could have seen some people like running away or something at
Yeah.
that point, and you don't see that at all. It's just yeah, the Hulk crashes in through a wall, and he's just like hanging out back on
Mhm.
page 16, and he's just like hanging out, and they float in with Jean, and there's no people around. They're blasting things. Iceman is icing things. There's no people around, and then yeah, those the paper rolls or whatever start falling. And suddenly, yeah, there's 50 people. So I agree. They could have done a better job of establishing that this printing press was open at that point.
Yeah. It took me out of it also because you're you have people just standing around watching destruction. Like
Yeah,
it's not real life. And
yeah.
it makes me feel like I don't know, it took
Their
me out of it a bit.
their placement, especially on that first panel, where the
Mhm.
Hulk's getting hit in the back, Jean's kind of there, and yeah, there's like a crowd of people on each side of him. You know,
Like like the
like they
background
are
of
like
a Street Fighter 2 game or something.
yeah, like they're like, hey, there's a big monster fighting some chick. Let's go stand over. Let's go watch. We live in a world with superheroes. You think they would know by now.
Yeah. Yeah, I just thought it's one of my problems with this era of comic book making. It's almost like they're insulting the audience a bit. Like, "Oh, they're not gonna notice that we just added this in the last panels of the fight." But, yeah,
Yeah,
that was my one complaint, my big complaint about this scene.
us as 40-year-olds, not the target audience of this.
Yeah,
Like we're
yeah.
picking up on it right away. But I doubt I noticed that when I read this when I was younger. But yeah,
Probably not.
it's a valid point. Um, Now we're back on to the fight with Cyclops. The people are out of the way.
Mhm.
Cyclops is blasting him, and then Iceman just unleashes with his uncontrolled power.
And that was probably the best bit of foreshadowing that they did at the beginning of this was laying that down so it makes sense that he's just having all these problems, and it worked though. It works for them because
Hmm.
he nearly kills the Hulk, or freezes him to the point where he's almost,
Yeah,
life or
he's
death.
inert. Yeah,
Yeah.
it says it makes him inert, and he can't. I mean, he can't move. He has no leverage, right?
Yeah.
So, I mean, if you're gonna try to slow down or stop the Hulk, that's kind of the only way to do it. Is like really bind him in a way to where he can't move.
Mhm. Yeah, he can't get any force behind it, so he's stuck, but he's still alive.
And that pretty much is going to wrap up the issue with lots more dialogue and thought bubbles about we're going to call gamma base. But I do like the inner dialogue of X Factor here when they're like, well, he was running from Shield for a reason. Like,
Yeah.
are we doing the right thing by turning him over? And Cyclops being Cyclops is like, well, I mean, I get what you're saying, but we've got other things to worry about. They'll know how to handle the Hulk better than us. You know, like I'm
Yeah.
sure it's safe for it's better for Banner, blah blah blah. But I do like the inner turmoil. It's almost the same inner turmoil that Dick was having at the beginning of the issue.
It's very much mirroring that, and Cyclops is just trying to wash his hands of it. He doesn't want to deal with the more responsibility that comes. I'd also like to point out this last page, splash page. It's got so much McFarlane machinery in it. I love it.
And when I see a panel like this by McFarlane, I wonder how much John Byrne influence comes through
He
for something like
mentioned
that.
he mentions in the interview I did with him, he mentions Perez and Byrne specifically
Hmm.
on the machinery side.
Yeah,
So
yeah,
the
both.
the
Yeah, I can see both Perez and Byrne in this. Yep.
yeah, so it's definitely a huge influence on him on a page like that.
So there's our Shadow Council again, basically saying like Bruce Banner's expendable. Go pick him up and be done with him. And that is the end of this issue.
You gotta love a good Shadow Council.
Yeah.
Shadow Councils didn't exist. Comic books probably wouldn't be that interesting.
All right, now we're on to issue 337. This cover reminds me of the X-Men cover. I think it's 124. Is it 120? The Proteus issue. It's a Dave
Mm,
Cockrum cover. I may be a little off on the number, but you know which cover I'm talking about?
I do. I'm trying to find it so I can remind myself, but yes, I do know what you're talking about. Maybe 126.
It's the X-Men, and they're basically just blasting through, and basically
Yeah,
the same
it's
layout.
126.
126. I was pretty close. So this kind of reminds me of that 126 X-Men 126 cover. And again, not McFarlane, but pretty cool cover. I think this is a better cover than the one before it.
Yeah, the one before it doesn't really give you enough where this does, and it kind of looks like, well, maybe they're going after him or maybe they're teaming up with him.
They're busting out though, right?
Yes.
All right. Now here we get Betty, and this is I want to say his name is Ramon. I may keep messing that up, but and you see where
It
she's
is
like
it is
battered up.
it is Ramon.
Okay. Um, you see where she's like kind of busted up, and that's from where I was talking about the uh, Bruce transformed while holding her, and it banged her up pretty bad.
And we get a little bit of the McFarlane smoke in there. Ramon smoking a cigarette, looking like maybe Michael Mann created him and he just hopped out of Miami Vice.
And notice his tie is blowing in the wind right there. The window's
Mhm.
open, and they're making a point. His tie is blowing, and the smoke too is blowing because that comes into play a few panels later.
Yeah. She writes a note to Bruce, and the wind takes it and knocks it off the counter and under the hospital bed.
Hmm. And that is going to be a nice repeating panel as we go along in the issue.
Hmm.
All right, we're still getting that same inker, Jim Sanders the third. Pretty cool
Yeah.
splash though.
No, he does a good job keeping that, those pencils kind of looking McFarlane-ish tight and detailed.
Hmm. Less of a heavy stroke, especially on the next page, the close up of the Hulk's face. You're starting to see some of that McFarlane noodling on the Hulk's face that we really haven't seen on these issues up to this point.
Yeah,
So,
and Hulk looks kind of, worn out, old, pruny, which would make
mhm.
sense if he's, been on ice for even just a couple hours.
This was an interesting scene to me as like learning about the X-Men in general and Cyclops, and he's like thinking about how he's trying to make this like thin, just like really needle thick puncture into the ice so that the Hulk can breathe, and he's trying to get it like right up to his face, just
Yeah.
enough for him to breathe. And I remember reading this, and I didn't realize like how much control Cyclops had over his blast. So reading this was actually what tipped me off to that because at this when I read this originally, I was not deep into X-Men. I liked Wolverine, but I was not
Sure.
deep into X-Men. I always
Yeah,
thought that was an interesting aspect of showing off what Cyclops can do.
they don't go into it in detail enough and I think this is, like you said, a good reminder. Also, just want to point out McFarlane doing a little bit of his interesting layout here. You know, the panel layout with Cyclops kind of being the causation of why it looks this way. So
Hmm.
I dig it. You know, he was told by DC and even Marvel early on to keep his panel layouts normal, and it's like,
Yeah,
no.
yeah, yeah. This is like a common trope of McFarlane, I would say, and I guess Frank Miller kind of did it too. Maybe
Hmm.
he pulled some where it's like, yeah, you get like a close up of a face that like kind of bleeds into like flashback or recap.
Yeah. Yeah.
We're well, Tom DeFalco is actually the editor in chief on this one. I
Mm.
thought Jim Shooter was the editor in chief on the last one. We may be seeing the switch over here.
Ooh, the regime
Yes,
change.
it was. Jim Shooter was the editor in chief on the previous issue.
Yeah, so it's the regime change, and maybe that's why this gets to be a little bit looser with its panel layout.
Maybe so. But we're still doing the Jim Shooter. We got to recap every issue.
Ugh,
Every issue
yeah.
needs a recap of what's been happening, and it has to be done in the story.
Yeah, because according to Shooter, everybody, what is it?
every
Everybody
comic
is
Every
somebody's
comic is
first
somebody's
comic.
first. Yep.
Yeah.
Which is it's a good philosophy, especially for the time period and how these comics were distributed at the time. But they probably would have been better off just doing a recap page on the inside cover, or
Mhm.
somewhere just being like previously on, instead of forcing the creatives to like work it into the story, because
Yeah,
you're taking up at least a half a page
you
to do
take up
that all at
valuable
once.
space.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So then we cut back to Gamma Base and we get the old Hulkbuster squad. This is still remnants kind of left over from stuff John Byrne introduced when he was on
Mm,
the Hulk for a short period of time. This one guy, Larroquette, is bitter because he was having like a relationship with another team member and she was killed in a training exercise, but he
mm.
still blames Banner and the Hulk. So that's why he's like especially agitated by the thought of, or like he's really pumped up to kill Banner at this point.
I also can't
And
tell if he's in a wheelchair or not.
he had been it's a floaty wheelchair. But yes, he is, because he had been injured in the same training exercise, and so had the silver-haired guy behind him. But the
Okay.
silver-haired guy had recovered, but he also harbors that same grudge. And then you've got a couple other members, Hideko, and there's like another like Asian man
Mhm.
that they were part of the Hulkbuster squad too, as like scientists. And they're not like, they're more on Bruce's side than these guys are. These guys are the soldiers bearing the grudge. So Quartermain's telling him like, yeah, we get to kill him, and you know that's what we're gonna do, and we
And
get the
he's
letter
having
from
his
him.
regrets too.
Yeah, definitely, definitely. He doesn't think it's right.
Yeah.
He's an established character too, so they probably didn't want to make him out to be completely like turning heel on the Hulk, so to speak.
Mhm. By the way, before we get to the top panel, I feel like, and I'm not even a person that ever watched or read Battlestar Galactica, but I feel like there's some Battlestar Galactica influence on those ships.
I can definitely see that. And then one of the first, I think it was the first Peter David issue actually that McFarlane did. The ships
Mm.
they were in were 100% snow speeders from Star Wars. So yeah, McFarlane definitely digging into his pop culture
Oh,
references
yeah.
for the stuff, for the ships and stuff, and good machinery again on the
Yeah.
side with on the panel with the guy in the wheelchair. I mean, floaty chair, whatever you want to call it.
Yeah.
I like this next page too with Gene getting snacks from
Mhm.
the
Mhm.
vending
Just
machine while they're just chatting.
yeah, it's a good use of her powers, and, you gotta get those Twinkies in there, and then Bobby trying to drink that soda doesn't work out too well for him.
Yeah, that's a good panel though with Bobby. I mean, like that's a McFarlane panel.
Oh, yeah.
That last one where the Coke is exploded up and his facial expression and everything. That would definitely be one if you like keyed it in just on that. Be like, who drew this? I would be able to identify that one pretty easily, even not knowing the issue.
Do you think, in the panel where she's removing the snacks and the Twinkies go past those people's faces, is the guy with the hair and the glasses, is that Peter David?
Could be. I don't really know what he looked like at this point. I
I
mean, he
think you
I know
kinda
by
look
the
like
'90s he was balding, but yeah, it
yeah.
could be. He probably had glasses and a mustache like that.
Yeah. Lots of 4 distinctive faces in that.
Yeah, yeah. And who are these people? Where oh, they're
Yeah,
still
there's
in the, printing press place at this point. So these are probably some of the people that were, like, running past. But the one girl looks like a kid. Maybe not,
yeah.
but
So very strange. It's like a video game where, NPCs just populate out of nowhere.
yeah. Shield shows up, and they're already wanting to, like, just take him out, those 2 guys, and they put that, like, cannon in his face, and Quartermain
Mhm.
smacks it away. Definitely in that panel with Quartermain, we're seeing the McFarlane facial noodlings.
Yeah, I mean, that feels like it's completely inked by McFarlane. Nothing
Yeah.
about that, leads me to believe that that guy Sanders, inked that, but got a little, maybe early Cable here with that gun and, I mean,
The white
it's a
hair.
yeah, it's a very McFarlane, but also very 90s. Even though
Yeah.
we're not in the 90s yet, it's a very
Nope, nope,
90s
we're
looking
getting there.
yeah.
We're getting there. Um, they asked Cyclops to chisel him out. I love this panel with Iceman sitting there with the Hulk.
Yeah.
It's like center of the page. There's just the way he's like created this like little, sitting area to like watch him, and he's like really thinking about it the whole time. Like, are we doing the right thing?
Mhm, mhm. Yeah,
And
he's got a good conscience on him.
yeah, he's supposed to be keeping the Hulk frozen too. There's your zipatone too on that one page. It's got a little bit of a moire pattern happening.
Yeah, yeah,
At least in my copy.
and I can see it, and I absolutely love the 2 small panels of Hulk's eyes,
Mhm.
he's keeping them closed, and then he opens them because of what Bobby says.
Yep.
It's supposed to be symbiotic there.
Yep. Yeah, that's a really good that's a good page in general for the whole flow of the storyline happening. And then we
Mhm.
get Betty's note. Keep coming back to that.
Yep, yep, and, we get an appearance from, one of those, classic Hulk characters in the next page.
Yep. Doc Samson in his full on 80s vest.
Look at those shoulder pads.
I know that back side of him where you really see the shoulder pads.
It's so good. It's so good. The pages become more and more McFarlane as we get into this book. It's almost like maybe his deadlines were easing up on whatever else he was doing,
Yeah.
but these 2 pages feel more McFarlane than almost the entirety of last book.
Yeah, I agree. And as it goes on, maybe he's more comfortable with the character at this point too. I mean, he's
Mhm.
done about 6 issues now. And like we pointed out, and I just noticed it while discussing it with you, the regime change
Yeah.
of Shooter to DeFalco
Yeah, and that
maybe
that
was
following
allowing a
page
little loosening up.
yeah, that following page kind of feels that way with the 6 panels of every character having the reaction when they hear the cracking, which I mean, look at how dialogue less this page is and how well it's put together.
You get everything across from it, all of the surprise, and then Cyclops is just like, "Mm, yeah,
He's so apathetic.
yeah," just like, it was bound to happen, I guess.
Yeah. And,
Bobby's
you don't
probably a little too shocked because since
yeah.
he was in there not keeping it thawed, but maybe he's just putting on like, what?
Yeah, how did that happen? And honestly, like, how could you beat, just this piece of dialogue from the Hulk? All right, who gets smashed first? Like,
Yeah,
that's all I wanna see in a Hulk book. I want
yeah,
that.
love that. I was like, crackoom,
Yeah.
chains
Um,
breaking, eyes flying everywhere, and yeah, who gets smashed first?
I kinda want that on a shirt. And the next page, it feels like it's a complete McFarlane page. Like, this doesn't feel like anything else than McFarlane doing what he does
Mhm.
best on this next page.
Yeah, you get so the little middle panel, the
Mhm.
horizontal one, where they're flying into each other and it's an energy burst. There's an earlier issue he pulls off this technique too. It's kind of like I know the kayfabe guys has pointed out how like Kirby would do that, almost like to speed up the action or like being
Yeah.
able to draw the action. And there's one where the Hulk is jumping into somebody, and it's like it's almost like half the body has just disappeared. There's like not space for it in that little explosion, but here it lands like pretty perfect. You can kind of see where the rest of the figure would be if you were to draw them out.
Yeah, yeah. It feels like maybe it was just a. I mean, it probably was just a paste up. And the panel where he's grabbing Samson's face, such a great panel.
Yeah, yeah, that would be awesome to see blown up. And that one doesn't really have the inking issues that we've been discussing. It feels more McFarlane as well. I mean, the
Yeah.
hands, you see the bone structure of his like hands, the one on
Hmm.
top. Uh, and of course, you gotta love the shadowed face with the teeth and eyes
It's
coming
so good.
through,
Yeah, I mean,
smashing Samson.
there's a chance he inked some of these pages. There's a chance. I mean, this was the time where all these guys were trying to figure out how to make deadlines. Who knows? He could have given this to somebody like Jim Lee or something to ink. I mean, those guys were known to do that.
Yeah,
But it's a great page, and you just feel the intensity of all of it.
yeah. Good dialogue here too of like, it's Leonard Sampson. Do you remember me? He's like, yeah, you're the one that's almost as strong as me. You know what almost means? Nothing.
Nothing. Love it.
Wonk. And then Marvel Girl shuts his eyes, uses her telekinesis just to shut his eyes.
Mhm. Good trick. And then here comes
Yeah,
floaty chair guy.
floaty chair. Yeah, he comes and just gets in the way. Well, they all join in and hit him at the same time, which I guess knocks him out enough to put him in this kinetic, uh, you know, cuffs
Yeah,
thing or whatever. This,
yeah, his harness is,
yeah.
whatever it is. It's really hard to
Look at
tell
that.
what it is from that shot.
Yeah, look at that face though. The like, get me out of here face.
So good. Yeah, I feel like that would have been a sticker in a vending machine in 1987.
Yeah, just open his eyes though.
Yeah,
But
yeah.
yeah, all right.
You get a better
Then
look
that
at the harness on that 13, page 13.
Yeah, and it's like they sell it like a kinetic cuffs or shackles or something that as he fights against them, they get stronger too. So it's like he's fighting against himself to get free.
Mhm.
Um, and then he explains the stuff about the gamma bomb stuff going on. That there's a secret
Yeah.
stash of gamma bombs that the government is hiding, and they're all just like, "What? That's not true." And he's like, "Yeah." And he explains seeing the Half Life character, and then the mystery shadow person who's putting some boxes down and pushing buttons.
Yeah, meanwhile, and then it's funny that it goes from that to elsewhere. It's very it goes from being this great comic to Scooby Doo all of a sudden.
And then the character's name is Trump.
Yeah.
And you know that had to be a nod, like a
Oh,
he
yeah.
he wasn't even liked back then. So that had to be some kind of like, we're gonna make the asshole character and we're gonna call him Trump.
Yeah, people knew who he was back then.
Yeah. Um so there's the lair cat. So there he looks like he's on like crutches or something. He's out of the floaty chair
Yeah. Yeah, he's got,
because he's
those
standing.
kind of brace crutches.
Yeah. And then they go and X Factor and Samson as they're like coming out of the room that the Hulk is in. And there's the two other characters too, Hideko and I forget the other guy's name.
Oh,
They're
yeah, I
just
see
kind of
them on the
around.
left.
Yeah, they're left over from that burn era, and again, we're still kind of tying that up. So Peter David does a good job of not just like throwing it out the window. He finds a way to like logically like let's move them out of the storyline.
I would just like to point out that it goes from meanwhile to elsewhere to meanwhile and then and.
And that's a
Oh, the
pretty
80s.
pretty fast pace of dun 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 dun.
Yeah, exactly,
Yeah,
exactly. So, on the next page, you get Doc Samson is, he's kinda pissed now. He's kinda
yeah,
pissed. He's really pissed,
yeah.
actually.
This happened kind of abruptly, I felt like, in a way, because they had just learned about the gamma bomb stockpile. And it's like they
Mhm.
were going to ask about it, and then they're surrounded by Shield, and he's just like, "Forget it," and knocks down these two conveniently placed pillars where they were surrounded.
It kind of makes me think about what I was saying about the other issue. It's like there's just a lot of exposition for no reason, and because the beginning of the books sometimes start out as a slog, you get this towards the end, you
Yeah.
know? You get this, "Oh, well, we could just do boop, 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 boop," and without really much exposition, without much storytelling.
Mhm. But it is just to get to the we're just trying to get to the end of this story, which is gonna kick off the next story too.
Yeah, yeah.
Um, but we're ending the Gamma Base story too, which again, this is left over from Burn stuff. They're just trying to get rid of that aspect of what was going on with the Hulk to move on to what I think Peter David really was wanting to do.
Mhm. Mhm.
And now we got
And
X Factor helping the Hulk bust out. Um, Bobby like freezes the shackles so that he can break them, and the Hulk is like, "Hey, I haven't forgot that you're the one that got me into this mess."
yes, that was dumb. You think I forgot you got me into this. I mean, the snarkiness of the Hulk really does add to the story.
Yeah, I mean, it's an appealing aspect of this gray Hulk when he'd been just green and Hulk smash for decades. Well, probably about 2
Mhm.
decades. You know, you're like, if you're gonna change his color and change him, like, change him.
Yeah. Yeah, give him more character, give him a
Yeah,
different kind of characteristics. And, that guy Saunders, who's not the inker, Sanders, he
yeah.
gets a
Sanders.
gnarly a gnarly piece of shrapnel to the chest, and this woman just yoinks it out. Not sure that's how
Yeah,
that works.
yeah, it might cause a little bleeding, a little bleeding out.
Yeah. He says it's to his shoulder, but, either way, it's
Right.
almost in his chest.
Um, so they're essentially just busting out a gamma base, get another cool small panel of that shadowed face with the teeth and eyes. You know, we're making sure we hit that pretty often at this point.
Mhm,
And
mhm.
and then there's our cover image busting out.
Yes, and I would also like to point out that, the Hulk doesn't discriminate. He even tosses guys in wheelchairs around.
Yeah. Well, when they does have like cannons added to him, you know.
Yeah, no, it's fair game, it's fair game. I just think it's pretty funny that he's literally tossing him. He's perpendicular, he's horizontal. After they bust out though and the sun comes up, oh, I love this
Mhm.
transformation page. Absolutely.
Yes, I spent a lot of time just staring at this last night when I was looking at it again. And like each issue, like we said, these Hulk faces at the top are very McFarlane Hulk face. When I think of the McFarlane Hulk, this is more like the face that I think of than that like
Mhm.
smooth look of like the previous issues.
Yeah,
It's almost like the transformation of yeah, that the brow, the like little like aged noodly marks, the pruniness to his face that McFarlane does, all of that. And
Yeah.
yeah, this whole sequence though of the reverse transformation back to Bruce is pretty incredible. Probably the best one McFarlane's done in this run so far.
Yeah, and I think this is probably the best page or my favorite page of the entire two issues.
Yeah. So they load up in a shield van and head out.
Yeah, while everything's blowing up and there's,
Yeah.
I love this panel of all the dudes holding guns because it's like the Punisher is the second to last guy. I mean, Frank Castle's just right there.
Yeah. Yeah, that's 100% the Punisher.
And I think Cyclops actually might be having an identity crisis because that's him in the first set of the group.
Yeah, it's just blue glasses instead of red. That
Yeah,
that's our
yeah.
that's our Trump guy actually, I think.
Uh, I think you're right. I think you're right. But I just, that panel just, it's
Yeah.
great. I love it for so many reasons.
Yeah. I like the van like kind of tilted on its side too. I guess it like pulled up real fast. And
Hmm.
so it's like kind of sideways and they're all like hopping in and Cyclops is like, "Thanks for the ride. Your name's Clay, right?" "Not anymore. Now it's Mud." So it was
while they're
Clay that
getting
was like setting up all the boxes and stuff.
yeah. I gotta say, I appreciate, Peter David's snarkiness.
Yeah. And then he starts flipping these switches in the van, which is setting off the bombs and just blowing up Gamma Base. Bruce is freaking out because that's probably the equipment that maybe could have helped him. He's like, "What are you doing?" He's like, "We can't let it stand, or they'll just catch us in a day." And he just blows it all up.
Well, that's what they do best. They blow stuff
Yep.
up.
The other two characters I've been pointing out, they're like, "Nope, we're not gonna stick with you. We're gonna go just do our own. Like, we're just gonna go live happily ever after." I don't think we ever see them again that I recall.
Mm,
Um,
it's nice that comic book characters get to retire every once in a while.
yeah, and then uh, Clay, Rick, and Bruce go off on a road trip together.
Yep.
We see Betty's note there still on the bottom of the floor. Cleaning lady comes up and tosses it out,
And
kind of
then
ending that chapter.
yeah, he never gets to see the note, and then we get a little Doc Samson coming up from the wreckage.
Yep. And this is what I think this is kind of the end of Doc Samson for a long time too.
Is it?
I don't think he really I mean, I'll find out as I go along, but he's not there for the Joe Fixit stuff. I don't think he reemerges until just before the merged Hulk stuff
Mm-hmm.
is when he kind of comes back.
The wedding.
So
Maybe he's in the
yeah,
wedding. Yeah.
well, he's definitely there for Rick's wedding. Is that what you mean?
I think so. Who gets married in 40 issues
Um,
after this or so?
yeah, Rick marries the redhead Marlowe that Joe Fixit meets in
Okay.
Vegas. But yeah, he's definitely back by then because that's in the merged Hulk era. But he comes back because he helps create the merged Hulk with his psychobabble stuff.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. The I will say the cleaning lady throwing out the letter, those the last panel in particular just seems it's very McFarlane to me.
Of the lady throwing it out.
Yeah. Yeah. He's done that. I
Yeah,
feel
he's
like
got.
in so many different issues.
I like that the thing is clearly labeled trash. In case you were wondering what she was throwing it into there,
But
and
yeah, I
she's
mean,
mumbling about how terrible her job is while she's doing it.
well, of course, she's a cleaning lady, you know. That's what they have to be upset about. But
All right, so
this was a lot better talking it out with you than reading it by myself.
you came into it ready to tear it apart, and you're like, "Oh, well,
I
maybe
did.
this wasn't so bad." So,
Yeah,
yeah, you're saying that you liked it better. What are some things you thought you didn't like that now that we've talked it out, you have kind of come around on?
I think the first issue kind of weighed it down with a lot of the dialogue and the hokiness of, this that guy selling out Banner
Hmm.
and, kind of wasting 11 pages without the Hulk.
Hmm.
Um, the second issue kind of cleans up and makes it a Hulk book.
Yeah. Well, it's the Hulk is in the whole thing up until the last couple pages.
Yeah. Yeah.
Even though he's trapped in ice or shackles for probably the first half there. At least he's there.
Right. Right. And it's like when I grew up reading Wolverine, even though that first ongoing series was all Patch and in Logan, and it wasn't a lot of Wolverine, he still used
Hmm.
his claws and his fists.
Yeah. Yeah.
y- You know, um, but yeah, I think talking it out with you and looking at it under the microscope made me appreciate this book a lot more, and actually made me appreciate um, a lot of Peter David's dialogue more. The snarkiness is
Yeah.
fun to point out.
It definitely works for this gray Hulk. Um, and it works out his whole run, really. He continually is evolving the Hulk as he goes along. I mean, obviously, we've got this era of Gray Hulk, and then the Joe Fixit. It's still the same Hulk. He's just
Yeah.
wearing a suit, you know. And then eventually, you get the merged Hulk, which a lot of people don't like because they want him to. But even the merged Hulk has a meanness to him that gets
Mhm.
overlooked, and like they don't show that in the movies, so I see why people get upset about the merged Hulk in the movies. Soft kind of, but he still had like a meanness about him that it's
Sure.
always there in the Hulk, you know. So I'm looking forward to getting to that, but I'm a ways off from getting to
Yeah. Yeah,
those
you
issues
are.
still. Um,
But this was a lot of fun.
yeah, I'm glad to have you on, and hopefully I'll have you back on soon for another big time issue in this run, right?
Yeah. We're gonna do 340.
Yeah. Um, so Rick and them they go off and they're looking for the gamma bombs, which is this is setting up the new storyline going
Mhm.
forward. And have you read all of that from this issue, or you've just read that 340 through 345?
Yeah, I haven't read, I can't say that it's any time recent that I read 338 or 339, but I
Okay.
will now.
Now you want to get into it before we do 340, right?
Mhm.
All right. Any final thoughts on these before we hop off?
Just, I like to have my mind changed about certain writers and certain ages of writing. So this is a step in a good direction for me. And yeah, it was a lot of fun to go through these with you. And I'm really excited to see the rest of what you have to say about all of the Hulk run. And I'm excited to look at more issues with you.
All right, as we head out of here, West Coast Avengers, be sure to check out the description to find Dave all over the internet and his motto, see Todd, by Todd. Until next time.
Read your comics. I had to look at the names so to make sure that I didn't say more. Well, right? Like, it's like both of those things I love, and, yeah, it's hard because I hear the read more comics every day when I watch kayfabe.